Professor, I tried to make this video while referring to, actually just reading my notes. I'm going to refrain from doing that here because it's just tough. I want to try to really commit myself to this argument because I have some very, very genuine problems with what you are saying here, sir. So let's begin. First, you want to point to something. You want to point to culture. You want to say, this is authoritative disambiguation. The reason you use the word authoritative is because you assume that something about humanness is ambiguous, irreconcilably ambiguous, inherently ambiguous, irrevocably ambiguous, okay? Something inherent in the concept. There's something, no situation could present itself in which here's a human and it's not ambiguous. The idea of human is always ambiguous. Not everything is ambiguous, but always the concept of I, of self. You say that the heart of the issue is trying to separate the self from the whole. You say that this is authoritative disambiguation. Why? Because you think that the self is not separate from the whole. You feel that the self is always attached to the whole. It is an irrevocable ambiguity, an irreconcilable ambiguity. I've used that term before. I hope you understand the way that I'm using it. Problem is this. How do you identify ambiguity? You identify ambiguity, sir, by saying that when we use the word I in several different ways to either refer to ourselves as a social persona or the contents of our mind or our body or any of these things, we have all these different words, the uses of the word I. Therefore, the concept is ambiguous. Now, if that was the only reason we could use a word in many different ways, then you would be justified in saying that any time we see the result of using a word more than one way, that is authoritative disambiguation. It'd be fine. It would be fine, like I said. But it's not. You're affirming the consequent in this way, sir. We can use a word more than once or in more than one way because of prevarication or mere laziness. We can prevaricate on things that are not irrevocably or irreconcilably ambiguous. And it's very important here that you recognize that the thing must be irreconcilably ambiguous in order for you to use the word authoritative disambiguation. Because the meaning of authoritative disambiguation is you're trying to disambiguate something that can't be disambiguated. Okay? So, in the case of something that is irrevocably ambiguous, that's fine. But the only way that you have to identify this is by a consequent that is not exclusive to things that are irrevocably ambiguous. It is a consequent of things that are merely prevaricated upon. Okay? So what you are doing is affirming the consequent and saying, look, the word is being used for more than one way, therefore it's inherently, irrevocably, irreconcilably ambiguous, therefore any attempt to disambiguate would be merely authoritative disambiguation. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Let me check my notes. Give me a sec. I'll just read this part just to make sure this is clear. My argument is this. The meaning of I is not ambiguous. People's use of the word I is ambiguous. Using a word ambiguously is a problem, but just because people use a word ambiguously does not mean the concept is certainly irreconcilably ambiguous. Without certainty that the concept is irreconcilably ambiguous, we have no justification to label anything as authoritative disambiguation, ever. So the second part of this. I'm not only going to argue that we can't be certain that the concept of self is irreconcilably ambiguous, I'm going to show you, demonstrate how the concept of self is absolutely not ambiguous to begin with. That it's not even a suspect of being something that is irrevocably ambiguous. And I'm going to do that on the basis that all of the different concepts that you gave me, all the different ambiguous uses of the word I, orbit around a single common trait that can be isolated and turn into a concept itself, and operates as a concept unto itself. Which means, sir, that anytime we use an ambiguous use of the word I, it will contain within it that common definition plus additional information to, say, articulate a certain nuance or be used in a particular sort of way for a particular kind of purpose. However, all such ambiguous uses of the word I will contain the same concept at its core. And once we isolate that concept, the self has become disambiguated without the basis of hollow authority. So here we go. This part I do need to read. Of the examples you mentioned, from the self being the social persona, the body, the mental landscape, or whatever the case may be, the common denominator I see is the exclusive source of thought and action. Meaning, I propose that the explicit concept of self, the unambiguous concept of self, that all ambiguous uses of the word I rely on and are contingent upon, or refer to, I should say, is an exclusive source of thought and action. That is I, an exclusive source of thought and action. You've mentioned in the past that, we're born into this world with this great wash, this great drama, this great parade of culture and language and all this stuff happening, and that none of our thoughts are actually our own, or even our actions are not our own. They're just given to us by something else, by this great parade, is what I'm going to be referring to it as. The problem is this. That's no basis to believe that the self and the whole is inseparable, okay? Even if every thought that you and I have is a result of this parade, it's still the self that is thinking the thought. The thought can't think itself. Even if every action is just seen and observed and copied, it is still the self, the exclusive source of thought and action, sir, that is doing the acting. Because actions don't act themselves. Without the exclusive source of thought and action, there would be no thinking and no action. And if no such source of thought and action existed, the great parade would cease to be. Because of this, we can say that the parade is contingent upon I, upon the self, not the other way around. If the parade is man's culture or language, and if man's culture is the result of man's thoughts and actions, then a parade, this parade, sir, is the result of the source of thought and action, making it the self, justifiably distinct from the whole.